What would you do if everyone you trusted conspired to erase you from existence? If the person sleeping in your father's bed was systematically stealing your future, one forged signature at a time? Joanne Blackwell was about to discover that survival isn't about hope. It's about knowing when to run and when to fight back. This is her story. Stay until the end to discover the twist that changed everything.
The rain fell in sheets the day they buried Richard Blackwell, as though heaven itself was weeping for a man who'd built an empire from nothing. Joanne stood apart from the crowd, her black dress soaked through, watching a woman who'd been in her father's life for barely 3 years claim the role of grieving widow with Oscar-worthy conviction. Victoria Ashford Blackwell dabbed at dry eyes with a handkerchief that cost more than most people's monthly salary. She accepted condolences with practiced grace, her arm linked through the elbow of Joanne's half-brother, 17-year-old Marcus, who avoided his sister's gaze entirely. Joanne was 24, old enough to recognize performance when she saw it. But recognizing it and stopping it were entirely different matters. "Your father spoke of you often," someone murmured. The estate attorney, perhaps. Joanne couldn't remember his name. Everything since the phone call 3 days ago had been a blur of arrangements she wasn't consulted on, decisions made without her input, doors literally closed in her face. Did he? Joanne's voice was hollow. Her father had stopped speaking to her 6 months ago, after Victoria had shown him evidence of Joanne embezzling from the family vineyard. The evidence was fabricated, of course, brilliantly, meticulously fabricated, but her father had believed it. Or perhaps he'd wanted to believe it, because believing his new wife was easier than confronting the uncomfortable truth that he'd been seduced by a woman who saw him as nothing more than an acquisition. The will reading was scheduled for the following morning. Richard Blackwell had been a careful man, paranoid even. He'd established the will years ago when Joanne's mother was still alive, naming Joanne as sole heir to the Blackwell Vineyard Estate, 300 acres of prime wine country, a business worth $40 million. But Victoria had been living in that house for 3 years. 3 years to search, to manipulate, to destroy. That night, Joanne couldn't sleep. She walked the grounds of the estate where she'd grown up, the place she'd been effectively exiled from for half a year. The main house was dark, except for one window on the second floor, Victoria's bedroom. Joanne watched shadows move behind the curtains. 2 figures. Victoria wasn't alone. Joanne moved closer, her heart pounding. Through a gap in the curtains, she saw Victoria with a man Joanne recognized, Daniel Reeves, her father's estate attorney. They were examining documents spread across the bed, Victoria's finger tracing lines of text while Reeves nodded. "The signature's perfect," Reeves said, his voice barely audible. "No one will question it. The new will supersedes everything. By tomorrow afternoon, you'll control everything." Victoria smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who just cornered her prey. And the girl contested the will as expected, but with the psychiatric evaluation we'd arranged, she'll be deemed unstable, incapable. The courts will side with the grieving widow. Victoria's laughter was ice. Her father's final gift to me, tied up perfectly. Joanne stumbled backward, her breath coming in gasps. A new will. Forged. The psychiatric evaluation she'd been told was standard procedure was actually a trap. She had less than 12 hours before that will reading destroyed her life.
Joanne didn't go back to the guest house where Victoria had graciously allowed her to stay. Instead, she got in her car and drove. No destination, just away. Away from the betrayal, the conspiracy, the cage that was closing around her. She ended up at an all-night diner 40 miles from the estate, her clothes still damp, her mind racing through possibilities that all led nowhere. She had no proof. The real will was probably destroyed. Her father's attorney was complicit. She was alone. You look like someone who just watched their world end. The voice came from the booth behind her. Joanne turned to see a woman, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and the kind of exhaustion that spoke of experience rather than lack of sleep. She wore a rumpled suit and had 3 cell phones on the table in front of her. "I'm fine," Joanne lied automatically. "No, you're not." The woman slid into Joanne's booth, uninvited. "I'm Sarah Chen, private investigator. And before you ask why I'm talking to you, it's because I've been following your stepmother for 3 months. Joanne's exhaustion evaporated. "What?" "I was hired by the family of Victoria's second husband, Marcus Ashford. Ring a bell?" Sarah pulled out a tablet, began swiping through photos. "He died of a sudden heart attack, age 52, healthy. His daughter didn't believe it, hired me to investigate." The photos showed Victoria with different men across different years, wealthy men, all of them now dead. "How many?" Joanne whispered. "Your father was number 4, or possibly 5. There's one case I can't definitively connect." Sarah's expression was grim. Each time, same pattern. Whirlwind romance, quick marriage, systematic isolation of the man from his previous family, forged documents, and then death. The first 2 looked like natural causes. The third was suspicious enough that there was an investigation, but it went nowhere. Your father's death was ruled cardiac arrest, and with his history, he didn't have a history. Joanne felt reality tilting. He was healthy. He ran marathons. The autopsy report says otherwise. Lists a heart condition he'd supposedly been treating for months. Medication found in his system. That's impossible. Is it? Sarah leaned forward. Or is it just another document in a very long trail of documentation that Victoria specializes in creating? They had 11 hours. Sarah's investigation had uncovered pieces, witness statements from household staff, financial records showing suspicious transfers, medical files that didn't match Richard Blackwell's actual health history. But pieces weren't proof, and proof wasn't enough without time. The will reading is at 9 a.m. Once that forged will is declared valid, we need something that can't be ignored, something public enough that Victoria can't bury it. Sarah was already making calls, speaking in rapid shorthand to people who apparently worked for her. "The original will, do you know where your father kept it?" There were 2 copies, one with the attorney, compromised, and one in the estate safe, but Victoria changed all the combinations months ago. Sarah's smile was predatory. "Then we'll have to break in." Breaking into the estate at 3 a.m. was simultaneously the most terrifying and liberating thing Joanne had ever done. Sarah had skills, lockpicking, security system bypassing, moving through darkness like a ghost. They reached the study where the safe was hidden behind a portrait of Joanne's mother. The old man was sentimental, Sarah murmured, examining the safe. "Combination is probably significant. Birthday? Anniversary?" Joanne tried every date she could think of. Nothing worked. Frustration built with each failed attempt. Then she remembered something. Her mother used to say that her father kept everything that mattered in 3 places: his head, his heart, and behind her smile. Behind her smile. Joanne entered the date her parents met. The safe clicked open. Inside, documents, jewelry, cash, and a sealed envelope with last will and testament in her father's handwriting. "Got it," Joanne breathed. A light blazed on. Victoria stood in the doorway, perfectly composed despite the hour, a phone in her hand. "I've already called the police. They'll find you breaking into the safe, stealing documents. You finally proved everyone right about you, Joanne. You are unstable. Criminal." But Sarah was faster. She held up her phone, screen glowing. "Smile for the camera, Victoria. Or should I call you Catherine? Or maybe Jennifer? That was the name you used in Oregon, wasn't it?" Victoria's composure cracked. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. I have 6 months of investigation that says otherwise. Every identity, every forged document, every suspicious death. Sarah's voice was still. And as of 30 seconds ago when you just confessed on camera to framing Joanne, I have enough to bring you down. That recording is inadmissible. In court, maybe. But on the internet, Sarah's smile was cold. My associate just uploaded everything to 12 different news outlets and social media platforms. The story goes live in 5 minutes unless I send a kill code. Want to test me? The police arrived to a very different scene that Victoria had planned. The forged will was exposed, the real will was authenticated on the spot, and Victoria, revealed to be a serial con artist wanted in 3 states, was arrested before dawn.
The will reading at 9 a.m. proceeded as originally intended. Richard Blackwell's legitimate will was read, leaving the estate to Joanne with provisions for Marcus's education and a modest trust. The forged will was entered as evidence in what would become a massive criminal case. Victoria's attorney, Daniel Reeves, was arrested by noon. The investigation expanded quickly, revealing a network of accomplices, medical examiners, court officials, financial advisors, all paid to create the documentation necessary for Victoria's schemes. But the story that emerged over the following weeks was more complex than simple greed. Victoria, real name Catherine Mills, had been raised in foster care, passed between homes, abused and discarded. At 16, she'd met a wealthy man who'd promised to save her, then controlled her, isolated her, left her penniless when he died. She'd learned from him, learned that money was power, that documentation created reality, that vulnerability was weakness. Her first husband had been genuinely accidental. She actually loved him. When he died and she inherited everything, she discovered something that changed her. She liked the power. She liked being untouchable. Each subsequent husband was chosen more carefully, executed more precisely. By the time she met Richard Blackwell, she'd refined her method to an art form. Joanne visited Victoria once, in jail, 6 weeks after the arrest. She needed to understand. Did you ever feel anything? For my father? For any of them? Victoria's smile was sad, almost human. I felt safe. That's the only feeling that ever mattered to me. Everything else, love, family, connection, those are luxuries for people who never had to survive. That's not survival, that's predation. Call it what you want. Victoria's eyes were dead. You survived too, didn't you? You fought back. You won. That makes us more alike than you want to admit. No, Joanne said quietly. It doesn't. I fought to preserve what was mine. You destroyed people for what wasn't yours. There's a difference. She never visited again. Sarah Chen became more than an investigator. She became a friend, then a partner in a new venture. Together, they established the Blackwell Foundation, an organization dedicated to investigating suspicious deaths in estate cases and providing legal support for heirs being systematically disinherited through fraud. Marcus, Joanne's half-brother, stayed on the estate. He'd been as much a victim of Victoria's manipulation as anyone, used as a pawn. He and Joanne rebuilt their relationship slowly, learning to be siblings despite the years of poison that had separated them. The vineyard thrived under Joanne's management. She implemented her father's long-delayed plans for expansion, hired staff fairly, created profit-sharing systems. She turned the estate into something her father would have been proud of, something her mother would have loved. One evening, 2 years after Victoria's arrest, Joanne stood in the vineyard at sunset, watching light paint gold across the vines. Sarah joined her, carrying 2 glasses of wine from the estate's latest vintage. The foundation just got our 50th case, Sarah said. Woman in Enugu, Nigeria, stepchildren systematically forging documents to steal her husband's business. We'll help her, Joanne said simply. They drank in comfortable silence,
These two women who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to turn that darkness into something meaningful. Joanne thought about her father often, about his weakness, his betrayal, his final unwitting act of protection through the will he'd created when he was still the man she'd loved. She forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because carrying hate was too heavy, and she'd built something too beautiful to weigh it down. Victoria was convicted of 4 counts of murder, 12 counts of fraud, and conspiracy. She would die in prison. But before the trial ended, she did something unexpected. She testified, named every accomplice, detailed every scheme, provided evidence that led to the arrest of dozens of corrupt officials. Her lawyer said it was conscience. Joanne suspected it was something else, a final act of control, going down on her own terms, taking everyone with her. Either way, the truth came out, and truth, Joanne had learned, was more powerful than any lie, no matter how carefully constructed. Joanne Blackwell learned that survival isn't about waiting for rescue. It's about becoming the person strong enough to save yourself. Her father's betrayal could have destroyed her. Instead, it forged her into someone who now protects others from the same fate. The woman thrown away became the woman who caught others before they could fall. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that they are stronger than their circumstances. Sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the most powerful transformation. Remember, you are never as alone as you think you are. Help exists. Truth wins. And the person you become after surviving the unsurvivable is often stronger than you ever imagined possible.